And, I find it intriguing and also really coincidental that you were working on mental health and tied it all together, because one of the things that I've especially learned and seen over time is there is a very, very large comparative nature that goes on between mental health and low testosterone. A lot of people don't understand. They just think it's, oh, I'm tired. Oh, I have no libido. Oh, I can't, lose fat and gain muscle. But the mental part, the brain fog and all of these things, that's a big aspect of the low quality of life that you don't realize that you have with low testosterone. And I see that you've pointed that out a lot. And being with the psychology background, it helps to have somebody like you that goes into different areas of what low testosterone can really cause. Because like when I was reading your ebook, for example, and I'd like you to talk about this, you touched on, because the overall testosterone number, one of the things I love that you touched on is not necessarily the thing to look at. Like you pointed out, it was the free testosterone. But I liked how you covered all the areas that need to be addressed and looked at through blood panels, as opposed to just going, oh, my total T's low, so I need TRT, which may not be the case. Could you talk about, like you were talking about testing different aspects, looking at SHBG, looking at ferritin, things that people don't think about? Would you expound on that a little bit? Because I love that you did that, and it's so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. And the stuff that I talk about tends to be the stuff that I've realized in practice that just is the way it is. I mean, a lot of the time we want the shortcut, we want the path of least resistance, we want the magic pill. And if that existed, I'd be pushing people towards that. And I think that a lot of the time people go down dead-end pathways and they end up at this model that I like to relate to the movie Cars. I just did a talk at the Silverback Summit, which is hopefully going to go up on YouTube soon. And I've done this 3-part series, which is the first 2 chapters are free on YouTube, and it's called Your Brain on Testosterone and the War on Masculinity. And what I like to relate human beings to is like Cars, the movie, which is that like animated Pixar movie where the cars are like characters and they're alive. And I think looking at the human body as a interconnected series of systems, like a car, like a machine, but it's also sentient, it's conscious, like the characters in that movie. And when you go to a mechanic, if your car's making a noise or it's not starting properly, I don't know that much about cars, so my analogies aren't that great, but I think it still makes sense. But if you go to a mechanic, ideally what a mechanic should do, if they're not a dodgy mechanic, or if you go to a doctor and they're a fucking dodgy doctor, that can be a problem. But What they should do is perform a comprehensive workup of what's going on to try to diagnose the issue. They look at everything together, because sometimes if the noise is coming from over there, it's actually to do with this thing down here. We know that about cars. So One of the things that people really mess up when they're looking at their blood work and looking at their health is they just measure the marker that they're the most interested in. And from a marketing standpoint, which was my original background, is testosterone is the easiest thing to sell to a man. I mean, if TRT didn't shut down your natural production, it would be like selling a glass of water to a thirsty guy in the desert. I mean, everyone wants more testosterone. But what we need to be looking at when we're trying to work out what's going wrong is, well, if the testosterone's low, why is it low? And if it is low, is it in concert with other issues? Or has it being low for a long time actually caused other problems? We know that if your check engine light comes on in the car and you keep driving it, you're going to make the problem worse. We know that. And what we also need to understand, if someone's gone through a decade with low testosterone, or worse, if they've never had optimal testosterone to begin with, which is what's happening for a lot of these younger guys coming up, is their entire identity as well as their physiology is built around a low testosterone environment. And one of the most important things that testosterone does, well, I mean, it does a whole bunch of important things, but one thing I like to look at the most is how testosterone works as an antagonist towards a lot of the stress hormones in the body, like cortisol and adrenaline. And when a man forms in a low androgen environment, I find that he is more likely going to be predisposed to anxiety and depression, because neurologically he doesn't have that buffer against stress. He doesn't have that impulse and that drive and that feeling when you're 20 or 21 to go and take risks and be brave and be courageous and take a swing at the world and, leave your mark and do something bigger than yourself. He is going to be more driven towards avoidant behaviors, procrastination, staying inside, playing video games, to give that sense of sense of war and sense of competition, but in a way that is less vulnerable and has less of a risk because we're going to follow that path of least resistance more. But then the other problem is that if that's the trajectory of our lives when we're 21, 22, 23, when we get to 30 or we get to 35, we lack a lot of the competence and skills that we've needed because we've been in such a low energy avoidance state for so long. And I think that this is what's happening with a lot of guys coming up with anxiety and depression. They are basically conditioned psychologically due to living and embodying a vessel that is sick. It's geriatric. They've got the testosterone levels of a 60-year-old when they're 21. And then we're right. Wondering why they're lacking these masculine androgenic traits, which they ultimately need to compete in the world and get to where they want to go. And then they have this negative perception of themselves because they think, oh, I'm not trying hard enough. I'm a little bitch. I'm a failure. I'm psychologically the problem, where in reality, it's like, well, yeah, you're a bad driver, but if your car was fucked the whole time, then what did you really expect? How fast could you really drive and how good of skills could you have? Right. And I think it's important to approach these guys with a lot of compassion and understanding, which I think is very much lacking. And I think that looking at the whole body together is one of the most important things that we can do when we start. So if someone's like, okay, shit, this resonates, what do I do? You do a comprehensive lab panel. You look at everything together, and then you have someone who knows what they're doing to go through it, go through your symptoms, go through your diet and lifestyle, go through your history, understand everything about you and go, okay, what does this person as a whole have going on? Where are the deficits? What's the weakest link? What's the lowest hanging fruit? And do they need testosterone replacement therapy, or do they need to be able to support their own natural testosterone production? And if they do need TRT, do we need to make other interventions in their health or their mental health to make sure it actually works the way that we want it to work? And I think that that's completely lacking from a lot of prescriptions that guys get from TRT. It's just, here's your test, go take it, do a couple of jabs a week, see you later. And then they come back in 6 months, 12 months, or even 2 years, and they go, hey, I'm not the man who I thought I would be from this. And it's because they either haven't been taught to put the work in, they haven't been taught to fix their other health issues like their thyroid, their liver, their diet, their training, just their general day-to-day routines. And it's because I think providers aren't spending the time with these guys or having the know-how or the attention to detail to really treat men holistically and really understand what's actually going on.